Making terrible food when the family's all gathered? Come on! After just one bite of the meal, Osborne flipped his plate and the food onto the table, filling the room with his angry shout. All the relatives gathered looked shocked, staring in Osborne's direction. None of them had ever seen someone throw food on the floor like that. They must all be feeling the same way. Hey, what are you doing? It's your fault for making such awful food. Calling yourself a housewife and then making this kind of slop when it matters. Who could eat this? Osborne snickered through his nose. I looked at him with pity. I didn't make it, though. What? Osborne froze, making a foolish sound. Now's my chance, the perfect opportunity. The chance for me, who's been oppressed till now, to fight back. I took a deep breath and calmed myself. My name is Shelley, 32 years old. I used to work for a condominium management company until I got married a year ago and resigned to become a housewife. I would have continued working if not for my husband Osborne's strong insistence that he wanted his wife to be a housewife. I listened to Osborne's request and left my job. Truth be told, I would have liked to work a bit longer, but considering Osborne's income, I figured we could live comfortably without me needing to work. Osborne works for a major consulting firm. We met through work originally, and as we saw each other more because of our shared responsibilities, we became a couple and eventually got married. Osborne had been hopping from one consulting firm to another right after graduating from college, so he was skilled and had a way with words. During our work together, I was impressed by his professionalism and made the first move. I never thought a man like him would be interested in someone as average as me in both looks and abilities, but to my surprise, he reciprocated my feelings. I was so happy that I couldn't stop bragging to my friends about our relationship. My friends seemed fed up, but I was convinced that this was the peak of my happiness. When we decided to get married after a little over a year of dating, I was completely over the moon. Unaware of the troubles that lay ahead. You know, I'm busy with work on weekdays, so I'll only be home on weekends. Please keep that in mind. The night we filed our marriage registration at the city office, Osborne casually mentioned it while watching TV in the living room. I was taken aback by his words, thinking we were about to start a happy married life. What? What do you mean? I mean, I'll only be coming home on weekends. Keeps the romance alive, don't you think? Well, yeah, but... What, you got a problem with that? No, not at all. Honestly, I was taken aback by his sudden announcement. A weekend marriage, isn't that unusual? It's strange to decide such an important thing all by oneself. If he really wanted a weekend marriage, he should have mentioned it before we got married. Why declare it suddenly on the day we register our marriage? Sure, seeing each other less might keep the excitement alive. But isn't it natural to want to be with the one you love all the time? I was more downhearted than I expected, having my expectations for our newlywed life dashed like that. Whether Osborne felt sorry for me or was trying to cheer me up, I couldn't tell, but he was unusually kind to me that day. That night, we consummated our marriage for the first time, temporarily pushing the thought of a weekend marriage out of my mind. Maybe it was a win for Osborne's strategy. Looking back, Osborne's declaration was just the beginning. Little did I know, I was about to face much bigger challenges than a mere weekend marriage. 2 months into our marriage, Osborne only came home on weekends, as he had declared. As a housewife, I wanted to cook dinner for my husband who'd come home tired every day, but my enthusiasm quickly waned. Sometimes when he came home on the weekends, he'd eat out instead. So, Osborne hardly ever ate what I cooked. I had been hinting for a while. Can't we stop this weekend marriage thing? Huh? You're just a housewife. Are you really going against what I say? But Osborne would override my opinion as if he were the most important person in the house. Sure, I'm a housewife, but that's because Osborne wanted it that way. I realized that Osborne had me quit my job so he could have his way at home, making me economically dependent on him and unable to go against his commands. That must have been Osborne's goal all along. Lying in bed at night, frustration overflowed. How did things end up like this? All I wanted was a happy marriage. But it's too late for regrets now. All I can do is wait patiently for Osborne to change his mind. I felt like I was thrown into a tunnel without an exit, filled with anxiety. When our marriage hit the 3-month mark, Osborne started coming home only occasionally, even on weekends. This wasn't what we agreed upon. With us barely seeing each other, what's the point of being married? Can we talk about our life together again? I gathered my courage to ask him again on a Friday night. Osborne reeked of alcohol, as if he'd been out drinking after work. At the same time, I detected a sweet fragrance, like that of Venus. It struck me. No, it couldn't be. I've told you over and over. I'm not changing my stance now. Even drunk, Osborne was as adamant as ever in his position. But this isn't what we promised initially. You said we'd spend weekends together. And now? You're not even home on weekends. I never agreed to this. Osborne's face turned red with anger when I said this. I realized I had made him upset. How many times do I have to say it? I won't budge. Why do you always have to complain? Maybe it's time you understood your place. Osborne's attitude, so different from before we were married, not valuing me at all, made me go from angry to just sad. Why did Osborne even marry me? Unable to bear it, I quickly retreated to my room. When I heard Osborne getting into the bath, I crept out of my room and sneaked into his. I didn't want to do this, but I couldn't stand being at a disadvantage anymore. I frantically searched his room for any evidence. Months went by, and our situation remained almost like a separation. I stopped saying anything to Osborne, who hardly ever came home. Something else was on my mind now, so I decided to live quietly for the time being. Then, one day, I received a call on my mobile phone. The caller was mother-in-law, Marjorie. I haven't seen Marjorie since we met for marriage introductions. I picked up the phone, wondering what she wanted. Hello? Shelley, it's me. Marjorie, hi. What's up? It sounded like Marjorie was in a supermarket, with the bustling noise coming through the phone. New Year's is coming up. You'll be coming to our place, right? All the relatives will be gathering, and we'd love for you to join us. Oh, you're talking about New Year's? Yes, I'd love to come. More importantly, Marjorie. I wondered if Marjorie knew something about Osborne and decided to probe. Have you spoken to Osborne recently? Osborne? Oh yes, we've talked several times. I've been reaching out because I'm concerned about him now that he's finally married. He says his married life is going well. What? I was puzzled by Marjorie's statement. Married life is going well? Was that something Osborne told Marjorie? How could our weekend marriage be considered going well? Then it hit me. Osborne must be deliberately lying to Marjorie, making it seem like our marriage is all smooth sailing. Marjorie, being the caring yet overprotective type, adored her son. I could tell from our first meeting and the way she talked about him. No offense, but I think everything Osborne has told you might be a lie. To be honest. I explained to Marjorie that Osborne had declared from the beginning of our marriage that he would only come home on weekends, and recently, even those days have become less frequent. What are you talking about, Shelley? Osborne would never do such a thing. How dare you try to deceive me with lies? Who do you think you are? Marjorie was furious, raising her voice over the phone. I sighed, thinking, as expected. She only believes Osborne's words. She wouldn't doubt that Osborne could be lying. If anyone speaks ill of Osborne, even if it's his wife, she'd go all out against them. That's her way. I'm not lying. If you're concerned, I can record what goes on in the house for a month and show you. Frustrated at being made out to be the villain despite suffering because of Osborne, I snapped back at Marjorie with my suggestion, but she utterly dismissed it. There's no need for such an embarrassing act. You're the worst kind of daughter-in-law." And with that, she hung up the phone. I had a feeling it might come to this. My father-in-law is a man of few words, so I can't tell what he thinks of me, but Marjorie probably just sees me as a convenient wife for Osborne. Knowing this made me feel weary of continuing this charade of a marriage with Osborne. I decided it was time to put into action a plan I had been considering for a while. The day arrived when Osborne's family was gathering at their home for the new year. Unsure of what would happen, I was determined to do whatever I could. I was quietly fired up inside. As the new year dawned, I went with Osborne to his parents' house as planned. Before leaving, I made a crucial call to someone. Man, going to the family home is such a drag. Osborne got ready and left the house reluctantly. Upon arriving at his parents' house, we were greeted by Osborne's parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. A woman, who seemed to be a housekeeper, was preparing food in the kitchen. She wore glasses and a mask, and understandably, she didn't join our conversations, focusing on her work instead. With so many people around, it was hard to keep track of everyone. "Oh, Shelley, welcome." Marjorie, still probably distrusting me after our phone call, greeted me without a hint of warmth in her eyes, despite her welcoming words. Forcing a smile, I lifted my stiff cheeks. "Happy New Year!" and managed to put on a smile. After that, Marjorie and I barely spoke as the meal preparations went on. I helped in the kitchen as well. My father-in-law remained his usual silent self, sitting on the sofa and reading the newspaper. Once the meal was ready and I had finished serving, everyone began to eat. I noticed Osborne picking up a dish of stew. And just as I was about to reach for some rice, feeling hungry, he exclaimed, "Making terrible food when the family's all gathered? Come on!" The sound of porcelain hitting the floor made everyone's shoulders jerk. Osborne, having flipped his plate and the meal onto the table after just one bite, filled the room with his angry voice. All the gathered relatives looked at him in shock. Never having seen someone throw food on the floor like this before. They must all be feeling the same way. "Hey, what are you doing? It's your fault for making such awful food. Calling yourself a housewife and then making this kind of slop when it matters. Who could eat this?" Osborne snorted through his nose. I looked at him with pity. "I didn't make it, though." "What?" Osborne froze, making a foolish sound. "Now's my chance. This is the perfect opportunity. The chance for me, who's been oppressed till now, to fight back." I took a deep breath and calmed myself. "What are you talking about? You were in the kitchen preparing the meal just now." Osborne looked at me, confused, and snorted through his nose. "True, I was in the kitchen. But the housekeeper was there too, right? I was just setting the table. The housekeeper made the meal. Right?" I directed my gaze towards the housekeeper, who was supposed to be resting in the back room. Seeing the housekeeper, who had unexpectedly appeared, all the relatives were taken aback. "Yes, that's correct. See? And just so you know, I invited the housekeeper. Let me introduce her. This is my mom." The housekeeper, no, mom, took off her glasses and mask. Osborne and his parents were shocked to see her face. They obviously knew Mom and were surprised to see her here. Weren't you the housekeeper Osborne hired?" "No. Like I'd arranged that." It seemed Marjorie had assumed Osborne had hired the housekeeper, and now she was trembling. "Hey, Osborne, you know what my mom does for a living, right? She works at a traditional Japanese restaurant and makes delicious meals every day. But today, she made the dishes lighter for the family." "Why did you think I made the meal?" "Because you were in the kitchen until just now." Osborne raised his voice in frustration in response to my question. Indeed, from an objective standpoint, it might have seemed natural for him to assume that I, having been in the kitchen, had cooked the meal with my mom. However, what Osborne, who hardly ever ate my cooking, didn't realize was that my cooking style is quite different. Unlike the meal my mom prepared today, which was light in flavor, my dishes tend to be richer and more robust. I prefer my food with plenty of soy sauce and mirin, making it quite flavorful. That's true. But the main reason is that you've hardly ever eaten my cooking. Huh? What do you mean? Everyone except Osborne, confused by the situation, widened their eyes. Osborne's face turned pale, and he froze on the spot. I decided to confront him and lay bare all his dishonesty right then and there. On the day we registered our marriage, Osborne declared to me that he would only come home on weekends and spend the weekdays away. It was a so-called weekend marriage. He never mentioned such a thing before we got married. I was shocked. I couldn't agree to it, but whenever I tried to object or discuss it, he would just insist that as a housewife, I had no right to oppose him, and he never listened to my opinions. The relatives were visibly shocked as the truth about our marriage came to light, Marjorie, in particular. That can't be true. Are you still saying that? Osborne has always told me that he and you are living happily together. Don't say such embarrassing things in front of the relatives. Watching Marjorie staunchly defend her son, taking his side to the point of making fierce accusations, I sighed. It was almost time. Time to reveal that secret. Just as I was bracing myself, clenching my fists, a voice came from the entrance. Osborne? Are you here? The voice of an unfamiliar woman caused all the relatives to startle. As one of the relatives exclaimed in confusion, the door swung open, and a young woman peeked in. Dressed in a short skirt, sporting bright red nails, and with glossy hair, she looked to be in her 20s. After scanning the room full of people, she widened her eyes in surprise. Huh? She uttered, sounding confused. Osborne? What's going on here? She called out to Osborne in a sweet voice, looking around bewildered. It was clear that everyone except me was struggling to grasp the situation. Noreen, why are you here? Osborne's expression, filled with surprise, only added to Noreen's confusion as she tilted her head, unable to understand the situation. What do you mean, why? You're the one who called me here. You said you wanted to introduce me to your family because we're getting married. What? When did I say that? 2 weeks ago. When Noreen showed the message exchange on her phone, Osborne was taken aback. I never sent this. Then who did? As they argued fiercely, I stepped forward to clarify. Nice to meet you, I'm Osborne's wife. I'm the one who invited you here today. Sorry, Osborne, but I sent the message without your knowledge. What? Both of them were dumbfounded, their mouths agape. Indeed, I had been plotting to get back at Osborne since the day Marjorie invited me over for New Year's. 2 weeks ago, while Osborne was taking a bath late at night, I snuck out of the bedroom and grabbed his phone. It was clear from their frequent exchanges that Noreen was his affair partner. So, I decided to lure her here today, pretending to be Osborne, to catch them in the act. The relatives began to murmur among themselves after hearing our exchange. And Osborne's parents' faces turned pale. I had my suspicions. Why would Osborne start a life where he only comes home on weekends right after we got married? A weekend marriage means we barely see each other. What's the point of being married if that's the case? If he really loved me, he wouldn't want such a life. That's because I'm busy with work. I've told you this many times. Even after all this, Osborne was still trying to resist. In disbelief, I sighed heavily in exasperation. Work? Yes, I believed that at first. But then I started smelling perfume on you when you came home at night. I couldn't believe it, so I hired a detective to investigate. What? An investigation? Osborne trembled all over. I pulled out a report from a private detective from my bag and thrust it at both Osborne and Noreen. I had suspected Osborne's infidelity and had hired a detective a while back. Evidence of his cheating was quickly found, allowing me to gather a substantial amount of proof. You started dating 5 years ago when Noreen was just 15. You picked her up in town and started a relationship. Of course, you couldn't marry a child like Noreen. Plus, she's working in the nightlife industry now. I doubt your parents would approve. But you felt pressure from your parents to marry soon. So, you settled for a safe choice like me to stop them from nagging, all the while continuing your relationship with Noreen, planning to divorce me under the guise of being busy with work, and then marry her. That's the gist of it. I pieced together the information I learned from the detective's report and the message exchanges between Osborne and Noreen, exposing their deceit. What are you saying? Osborne would never. Marjorie tried to defend Osborne, but faced with the irrefutable evidence, she could no longer argue and her shoulders slumped in defeat. Osborne and the woman, Noreen, were trembling as they looked at each other. Eventually, Osborne broke the silence with an accusation. This is low. Using tactics like this to disgrace us, it's filthy. At his words, I felt a surge of anger so intense it felt like my veins might burst, and I shouted back. Low? What are you talking about? The only low thing here is you, disappearing right after we got married. Approaching me while having someone else, using me, and then playing the victim? You were just waiting for me to get fed up and initiate a divorce, weren't you? Well, sorry to disappoint. We will get divorced, but you'll be paying me a fair settlement in court. And you too, Noreen. I glared at Osborne and Noreen with the most intimidating look I had ever mustered. Why me? I don't have any money. Please, forgive me. I was wrong. But please, not the settlement in court. Ignoring their pleas, I glared at them once more. Just get out of here, now. And yelled. At my scream, Osborne and Noreen finally scurried out of the house with yelps. I sincerely apologize for the disturbance, everyone. As I stepped back, sighs of relief were heard among the relatives. They were all dumbfounded by Osborne's actions, at a loss for words. Shelley. I don't know what to say. Marjorie, who had staunchly believed in Osborne and criticized me, now looked away awkwardly. I left the in-laws' house with my mom, who had pretended to be the housekeeper. I likely wouldn't return to this house again. My troubled marriage of 1 year to Osborne thus came to an end. A few days later, I had Osborne sign the divorce papers and filed them at the city hall. I was officially single again. Although now divorced, my marriage had been so brief and distant that it hardly felt different. Since Osborne and I had lived in a rented apartment, I effectively evicted him without further issues. Afterward, Osborne, lacking funds due to squandering money on his mistress, had to ask relatives for a loan to pay the settlement ordered in the divorce. Despite his supposed elite job, his financial woes were due to his lavish spending on his mistress. However, after the New Year's incident, no relative was willing to lend him money. He was forced to take out a bank loan. Noreen, too, took out a loan to pay her part of the settlement for the divorce court. With both of them now embroiled in the struggle to repay their loans, any plans for marriage had to be postponed. At least until they managed to clear their debts, as both sets of parents unanimously advised against marriage under such financial strain. The in-laws, likely fed up with being entangled in any more trouble, seemed to think it was only fair for them to experience the hardship of debt repayment. Let him struggle with paying his debts for all I care. Compared to the year of suffering I endured, earning money to repay his debts seemed easy, almost like it was someone else's problem. Meanwhile, I returned to my previous job at the condominium management company and am now enjoying my work. It's much better for my mental health than staying cooped up at home. If I ever consider marriage again, I've quietly vowed to myself that it will be with someone who is supportive of both partners working.